but I don't know if I'm into it enough to actually get my own Netflix account since Netflix kicked me off my parents' account. Hello, my name is Adriana and today I will be doing my monthly wrap-up for the month of June. Monthly wrap-up for the month of June. Hi, my name is Adriana and today I will be doing my reading wrap-up for the month of June. As per usual, I will be starting with my stats. My stats are actually going to look a little bit different this month. I am doing some more kind of graphs in addition to my nice little pretty graphic. But we will start with my nice little pretty graphic as we talk about how many books I read this month in June, which was 14, which is a lot. That's a lot of books. That's an unhealthy amount of books, and I wholly blame Wonderathon. So shouts to Lizzie's Literary Life. If you missed Wonderathon this year, I am sorry. It was a blast and I will definitely be participating again next year. But yeah, it was intense. And I'm glad there's gonna be a year in between rounds. So with those 14 books, I read 3,306 pages with my eyeballs. I listened to 36.5 hours of audiobooks, and on average, my books were 330 pages in length. My average rating was a 3.83. And you can see my ratings break down here with most of my books being unrated. I will talk about that in my book by book review. But yeah, a lot of the books this month I didn't rate for one reason or another. Here you can see my breakdown of format. 5 of the books I read were hardback, 5 were ebook, and 4 were audiobook. Most of the books I read this month were fantasy, a couple kind of mystery thriller types, 1 historical fiction, 1 literary fiction, and 1 nonfiction. And then half of my books this month came from the library, so big shouts to North Central Washington Library System. They really came in clutch for this readathon as I was frantically scrolling for short books. 5 of the books I read I had bought in this year. 1 of them came from the publisher, and 1 of them every time Google Sheets has to do me wrong. 8 of the books I bought this month came from the library. And you know, we're doing our best. So with that, please consider liking and commenting on this video and subscribing to my channel if you like bookish things. And let's jump into my Wonderathon wrap up, because I think that's going to be the easiest way to approach this. Get all of those books out of the way and then I can finish off with the books I read at the end of the month. So Wonderathon went from June 3rd, I believe, to June 18th. I think we got 3 weekends is kind of how it ended up. So I didn't finish anything before Wonderathon, and we gotta count books for Wonderathon if we hadn't read more than 50%. So I think I was part of the way into a book and part of the way into an audiobook, and I ended up finishing those during the readathon. So with all that being said, let's start with the 3 books I finished in the first weekend of the readathon. And that was the first 3 volumes of Lore Olympus. This was kind of a almost buddy read amongst my entire team. Some of us had read the webtoon Lore Olympus comic and we had the physical copies and just wanted to actually read the physical copies. Some of the team had not read Lore Olympus before, so a lot of us ended up reading them because they're almost 350 pages each. And so if you read all 3 of these, you automatically have read 1,000 pages, and 1,000 pages was a milestone for the readathon, 1,000 pages per person. So we were all trying to get to 1,000 pages as quickly as we could right at the start there, so quick graphic novels, always a win. And these ones are just so fun. I thought I was going to have a little bit harder time rereading these than I actually ended up did. There's some pretty triggering stuff that goes on. If you're going to read these, definitely check the trigger warnings if you are sensitive to certain material, because basically all the trigger warnings are in here. I think it's handled with such grace and nuance that it was actually a little bit easier to reread than I originally thought it would. And the characters are so sweet. And their relationships are so thoughtful and meaningful, and it's just fun. It's just really fun to go back and reread these after having like not read them in so long. I think I started reading the webcomic in like 2018. So it was just really nice to like reminisce and get to see like the beautiful artwork. And I bought the Barnes & Noble editions, and they all have like bonus content in the back, so it's kind of fun to see like deleted chapters that the author had decided not to include, or kind of just like behind the scenes sketches of how the author does like different poses and stuff. I don't know, it's cool. I like it. And I guess for those who are living under a rock and don't know what Lore Olympus is, it's a Persephone and Hades retelling kind of set in a, I don't know, it's Persephone and Hades retelling, and the artwork is beautiful and incredible, and you can read it for free on Webtoon if you want, or you can buy these incredible bind-ups. The next book I finished was an arc from NetGalley, and it was the Epic of Helinthia. This one, I want to be really careful with how I do my review, because I do think it is a self-published book, and so, you know, I really want to help out self-published authors as much as I can and get these books out there, but I want to make sure that this book gets out to the correct audience, so I might sound harsh, but that's just because I want the people who read this book to really love it, because I want the author to be really successful. And I don't think I was the correct audience for this book. So as you could kind of guess from the cover, it does have kind of a Greek mythology spin to it, but I really think you would probably like this book better if you're not a big Greek mythology fan like I am. This author decided to do a Greek mythology inspired story, not based on any sort of specific mythology, which is fine, but I just really felt like the story and the plot didn't have enough of a Greek mythology feel to really warrant including the Greek pantheon in the story. I think this story would have functioned a lot better as kind of a more medieval fantasy with its own pantheon of gods. And I'm going to talk about this book later, and it's hard not to compare because I did read these books in the same month, but I think Godkiller does a much better job of incorporating a pantheon of gods, and the pantheon in Godkiller isn't based on any specific mythology, and I think this book would have serviced itself a lot better had it gone that direction rather than trying to include the Greek pantheon. But I think it does have a really good plot, and I think it does have a really good story. I just think it needs to be sold as more of a medieval fantasy than like a Greek mythology. The next book I read was Only Woman in the Room by Marie Benedict, and this one just like proved to me that I really can't listen to Goodreads ratings or Goodreads reviews. I don't remember what the rating of this is on Goodreads, but probably the first 7 reviews you see on Goodreads are tearing this book to shreds, and I loved it. This book wasn't what I was expecting either, but I wasn't upset about what it ended up being. So I originally thought this book was going to be a nonfiction book about the life of Hedy Lamarr, but it turned out to be a historical fiction based on her life. I guess like I just didn't know that much about Hedy Lamarr going in. I knew kind of the bare basics. She was, you know, a really famous actress who had done a nude scene, and that was very scandalous. But she was also super smart and like helped create this varying wave frequency technology that kind of became the basis for Bluetooth technology today. So she is a fascinating woman and definitely worth a peruse of her Wikipedia page if you're interested. But this was, you know, historical fiction, so a very dramatized version of her life. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really, really fun to kind of step into that 1940s starlit world, but she's just so smart and so much smarter than like the men around her, and especially smarter than the men around her give her credit for. She's Austrian, and so, you know, being in Austria in, you know, the early to late 30s is its own set of issues, and especially being of Jewish descent in Austria in the early to late 30s. I don't know, I just really liked this book. And I think probably mostly because it was Hedy Lamarr's life story. And I probably would have enjoyed a nonfiction about her life just as much. But this historical fiction was also really fun, and I really enjoyed it, and I think you should, not listen to the haters on Goodreads sometimes. The next book I finished for Wonderathon was Braiding Sweetgrass. Why am I struggling? Braiding Sweetgrass. This is a nonfiction written by a scientist who is also Native American. So she is a scientist in like ecology, but kind of blends her scientific education with her Native American background and spiritualism. And throughout this book, it was just really eye-opening for me in a way that not a lot of books about ecology and climate change and how we tackle it have been. I guess what I'm trying to say is like I've always seen climate change through a very Western lens that we as humans need to, we've been taking and taking and taking for so long, and now we need to stop what we're doing, cut back, cut back, cut back, cut back, cut back, cut back. But what she really tries to like reframe your mind with this book is not necessarily cutting back on our like consumption and everything else, but instead being grateful for the resources and things we do have access to and working with nature instead of, having human nature and earth nature like come together and meet, because obviously many civilizations had done that for a really long time before Western colonialism, and we don't necessarily have to think of it as losing our lifestyle as much as changing our lifestyle. I don't think I'm explaining this very well, but I do really, really think if you are someone who cares about environmentalism and you spend a lot of time engaging with Western critiques of, colonialism and materialism and consumerism, all the isms, I think this is a really good book to kind of reframe your mindset into something that's a little more mentally healthy and sustainable. If it's like a diet, like if you think of like crash dieting, like you're eventually going to relapse on your old eating habits. And if we think of saving the world as, crash dieting our materialism and consumerism, we're just going to relapse in the next generation. But if we think about really changing our lifestyles to something that is more sustainable for us and for the earth and for future generations, we can really make lasting change. So I don't know. I really like this book. I chose not to rate it because it is like a nonfiction and kind of, I don't always rate my nonfictions, but on my rating of read it or don't read it, this is definitely a high read it. The next book I read for Wonderathon was the 4th volume of Lore Olympus. The only reason I didn't read this in the first weekend is because it didn't come out till like halfway through the readathon. So again, like I said, my entire team was kind of like buddy reading all of these together. So when this 4th volume came out during the readathon, we were like, it's a sign. We all gotta read this book. And I think the 3rd volume is where, kind of the series really hits its stride and like you get those like really nice character building moments. So like this one, it's like you're in it, you're having a good time, and I'm just really excited to keep riding this wave, and I hope that I can just survive till the 5th one. I think the 5th one comes out in like October, maybe? I don't know. But it's gonna be really cool, and I just really love this series. The next book I read for Wonderathon was my only 5-star of the month, and that was Small Miracles. This book won the, what is that, SPFBO? Self-Published Fantasy Blog-Off Award, so kind of like an independently published book award, and there's a reason that this book won the award. It is incredible. It's impeccable. And I think something that I really need to start seeking out more independently published works like this, because there's just a humor to them that you don't find in a lot of traditionally published works. Like this book just had such a warm sense of very like just wholesome humor that I really, really enjoyed. Wholesome yet chaotic. The main character of this book is definitely like, what is that? Neutral good? I don't know, whatever that like D&D square thing is. Like, they are good, but chaotic. Like, they do good things in the weirdest possible way, and I love it. I need more of that energy in my life. It just makes me so happy. This book really rides that line of like being overly saccharine sweet, but it just barely like touches that line to where you're never like, oh my god, this is obnoxious. Like, even for someone as like cynical and dead inside as me, I really, really loved how sweet this book was. And yeah, 5 stars. I mean, I'm gonna have to probably read the award winners, that award winner, like every year now, because they just did such a great job with this book. I probably need to go back and like read more of them. It's just very good. It's a very, very good book. The next book I listened to was Recovery Agent by Janet Ivanovich. This one was fun. Like, it's just like a weird thriller, like kind of adventure thriller type of book. I think it's the beginning of a series that Janet Ivanovich will be doing, but our main character is, what does she say her job is? I get recovery agent. She recovers like lost items for like billionaires, or kind of goes on like treasure hunts for like millionaires and billionaire rich people. So I think she kind of works with like some insurance agencies to kind of like recover lost items. Like if some rich lady loses her ring on a yacht, this recovery agent gal can go out and find it. But she is from a small town in South Carolina that is still recovering from a hurricane, and her family is supposedly descended from pirates. So they have this old treasure map in her great aunt's house or something that she lost in her divorce. So she goes to the house to go find the map, and wouldn't you know it, she runs into her ex-husband. Suddenly her and her ex-husband are going on this crazy treasure adventure across the globe, and like, it's just nonsense. I love this type of nonsense. This is my jam. Like, these are the kind of books that are made for me personally as a reader, and I fall for them every time. Like, I gave it a 4.5 because I did have a lot of enjoyment, but like, it's not really doing anything different that I think it really deserves a 5, and it doesn't really have the nostalgia factor for me that I'm just gonna give it a 5 like I do a lot of the Sigma Force boys. You know, it is what it is, and I really enjoyed it. The next book I read was the first Prehistoric Serial Killer, and this is one of those books, like, I don't know how many of my watchers participate in readathons, but sometimes you have like a very specific kind of prompt that can get you a lot of points in a readathon. And this book fulfilled that very weird specific prompt for me. I was looking for a translated work that involved royalty, took place in a country other than like the US or the UK, had like green on the cover, had LGBTQ rep. And so like a lot of very weird specific things, if I could stack them on top of each other in one book, it would get my team a lot of points. And this book did that. But like, I also really enjoyed this book, some of this book. It is a short story collection from Spain that has all sorts of like very kooky, off-the-wall stories that were very, very fun to read. So as you can guess, one of the stories is about the first prehistoric serial killer. So it is about this caveman engaging in an investigation to find out who is bashing in all the heads of the other random cave people. And it's just very fun and very weird, and you would have never have thought you were gonna read a short story about that, but like, it ends up being really entertaining. So the first half of the short stories is kind of like, a lot of them have a paranormal type twist, and then the second half of the short stories are kind of like a crime thriller more genre, and all of the stories in the second half are connected in some way by some character, so they all kind of revolve around one major inciting incident. and you just kind of follow the trail of like different people involved in the inciting incident and their like lives over like that week. It's very, very cool and very, very fun, and it's something that I just had never read something like that before, so it was really, really cool to like engage with a totally different type of book than I ever have before. So if you're looking for something different than what you are currently doing, you might give this a try, because it's a good time. The next book I listened to, and that was Forget Me Not. This, I'm not gonna lie, it was the last weekend of the readathon. I was just looking for something very, very short, and this fit the bill. It's also a very well constructed story. It follows our main character, who is a young woman with Tourette's and has been kind of forced to hide it her entire life, and she starts at this new school, and it just kind of follows, I mean, it's such a short book, but it just kind of follows her development and learning to kind of accept herself, and when she does that, she finds that it's a lot easier for her to find people who also accept her. And it's very sweet, and I think it's a very important bit of representation, and I'm glad I read it. I don't think I've ever read a book with Tourette's representation before, so I can't really speak to how good the representation was, but it seemed to be handled at least with tact and grace and care. I just, like I said, can't really speak to the accuracy, but you know, it was short and sweet, and I would recommend it. And the last book I squeaked in right under the radar for the readathon was Nimona. I was looking for more graphic novels because I enjoyed Lore Olympus so much, and I just haven't really engaged with that many. I would like to find more, especially ones more geared toward an older audience. This was definitely kind of written in a more YA kind of Marvel style almost, with like kind of the chirpy nature of it, but I still really enjoyed it. It takes place in this really strange world of like sci-fi, but also like it's like a society in the future that became obsessed with like medieval times. So they have all this very fancy technology and very like high science, but then they're all just like super into jousting and like wear like knight's armor. I don't know. It's fun. It's definitely different and has like an anti-hero story, and I mean, I bought a physical copy of it because I did really, really enjoy it, and there is an adaptation of it coming out on Netflix, but I don't know if I'm into it enough to actually get my own Netflix account since Netflix kicked me off my parents' account. But we'll see. Maybe I'll just go over to my parents' house and watch it at their house. Those are all the books I read for Wonderathon. I crammed in many, many books for Wonderathon, which was just, again, a crazy, kooky, wild time, and I just had a lot of fun. So thank you so much to Lizzie's Literary Life. Definitely go check out her channel, give her some love. Some more books I read in June. Not that much more, because there wasn't that much of June left, and I got a little slumpy in my reading. So the next one I finished was Godkiller, like I had mentioned earlier when comparing to Epic of Helinthia. This is the first in a series following a Godkiller. It is her job to kill any remaining gods after the king outlawed the worship of gods in their country after a really large civil war where the gods kind of pitted against each other and destroyed a lot of stuff. I've heard it kind of described to The Witcher. I've never watched or read The Witcher or played The Witcher, so I don't actually know, but I really enjoyed it. There is kind of an animal sidekick kind of thing going on. There's a young girl. There's our crotchety, probably my age, Godkiller. I think she's like probably around my age, but she's very crotchety and cynical, which, you know, I vibe with. And there is also an ex-knight who fought in the God War, and he has given up his knighthood after what he had been forced to do in that war. So it's all very like, you know these characters. You know them. You love them. They work very well in this book. It is a very good time, and like I said, the world building of this book for how short it is impeccable. This author does such a good job of building out an entirely new mythology and pantheon of gods and how they work and how they operate. Like, I feel like I can make so many different types of connections within this world building. I can build all these cool headcanons and just really vibe with it. And I think that is something that's very hard to do. And I really appreciate that this author went after it the way she did. I will definitely be continuing on with the series when it comes out. And I don't know what else to say about this book. It was very good and I enjoyed it immensely. The last book I read in June was I Kissed Shara Wheeler. This is one I've been meaning to read for a long time, and I just finally decided to bite the bullet and listen to it rather than read it physically. I think it worked pretty well as an audiobook. It follows like the last month of a graduating class of seniors at a prestigious Christian high school in Alabama? Yeah, Alabama. And the pretty popular, beautiful, super smart valedictorian girl just disappears after prom night. Just poof into the ether. And before she had done that, she had kissed 3 different members of the graduating cast. Our main character, Chloe Green, Shara's boyfriend, Smith, and Shara's next door neighbor, Rory. So Chloe, Smith, and Rory kind of get pitted together in figuring out what happened to Shara. She leaves all 3 of them these pink cards that kind of send them on a scavenger hunt of self-discovery. And it's very unrealistic and very off the wall and very strange, but like, I think it all kind of takes place in the same cinematic universe of Casey McQuiston's other works that are just very, it seems like a very lovely world to live in, Casey McQuiston's fictional universe. I love it immensely. But I think it has a lot of really great representation of different sexualities, talks about race a little bit, as much as you can in a small Alabama town. And I think this would be a really, really special book for any teenager having to grow up in rural America. I think I would have really loved to have this book when I was a teen. So yes, this is another I would recommend. And yes, those are all of the books I read in June. I think I had a really, really great reading month. Not only did I read a lot, I actually enjoyed a lot of what I've read, which is awesome. Always a great perk of reading. So if you are watching this from Wonderathon, especially Team Ephesus, give me a shout out in the comments. Let me know what your favorite book of the month of June was, and thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next video.